Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back to my channel, Our Historia, back with me, Reyhan Azra Hakim, and today we are going to continue our study. And the topic for today is comparative literature in America, a theme and a genealogy. The institutionalization of critical and cultural study as a field within the field of literary studies has taken place a series of phases and developments. Prior to the 1980s, the field saw very little in the way of critical and cultural theory for a couple of reasons. The first one, new criticism was the dominant approach in literary studies in the United States, and its governing perceived that the literary text is a self-contained entity, not requiring recourse or to any extraneous disciplines for its understanding. Militated against approaches which hinge on such extraneous disciplines as the sociology of knowledge, hermeneutics, the history of ideas, cultural history, and so on. New criticism's demise coincided with the ascendancy of critical and cultural theory in the field of literary studies. And while it will be too facile to suggest that the rise of one was somehow causally connected with the fall of the other, it nonetheless remains true that circumstances underlying this rise and fall were not a matter of pure happenstance. Second, the dominant paradigm for the American version of comparative literature until 1980s required the comparison of texts from two or more Western European national literature, English, French, German, Italian, and Spanish primarily, with interpretive tools derived from philology serving as the primary basis for such comparison. Non-Western European literatures, Russian and Scandinavian especially, were sometimes allowed into this company, especially if canonical and well-translated authors happens to be involved. So here's the overview of the field of critical and cultural theory during the 1980s to the mid-1990s. Speaking very generally, critical and cultural theory emerged in the US in the late 1980s and early 70s in the form of reception of several movements, the most prominent being structuralism and post-structuralism. The latter's provenance was mainly French, where representative authors were concerned, though overwhelmingly American when it came to a subsequent institutionalization. Hermeneutics, German in inspiration, psychoanalytic criticism, feminist theory, Marxist theory, Black studies, cultural studies, primarily British in origin, and certain strands of continental European philosophy. The work of the Frankfurt School and phenomenology being perhaps the most prominent. In the 1980s, a second phase of institutionalization of cultural critical theory saw five significant developments. First, there was transformation within the above mentioned movement of cultural studies took on a more recognizably North American cast. Second, these movements were augmented by other intellectual shifts taking place in the American academy. Third, there were fusion of and overlaps between movement and paradigms as theoretical reapproachment were brought about between feminism and psychoanalytic theory, post-structuralism and American pragmatism, African-American studies, and post-structuralism, Marxism and feminist theory, etc. The fourth one is new subfield emerged within critical and cultural theory to join their already established counterparts, post-colonial theory and queer theory being perhaps the most notable of these. Fifth, there was an appropriation of work in some of these subfields by practitioners belong to other disciplines. For instance, cultural anthropologists began to engage with cultural studies, historians with post-structuralism, economists with rhetorical studies, theologians with feminist theory, and so forth. Overview of the field of critical and cultural theory during the mid and 1980s to the present. In 2011, it is clear that there is no normative syllabus of curriculum in literary studies and critical theory. If indeed there had ever been such a thing, as we seen above a couple of decades ago, the field was largely defined by the following features: a movement away from the traditional kind of complete towards a more intellectually ramified comparativism, involving a diverse range of theoretical paradigms. This generally acknowledged but assorted array of key paradigm included post-structuralism, cultural studies, feminist theory, Marxism, psychoanalysis, post-colonial theory, film theory, critical race theory, and so on. An accompanying canon also generally acknowledged of master thinkers: Barthes, Baudrillard, Bourdieu, Derrida, Fanon, Althusser, Lassalle, Spivak, Raymond Williams, Kristeva, and so forth. The emergence of world literature as a literary subfield has been a striking development in the last decade. World literature courses are taught in English, and so the work of Goethe and George Sand, for instance, are taught in translation, a move frowned upon by purists in comparative literature department. Even though this trend seems irreversible, accompanying the growth of world literature is the appearance of a new kind of English study. There has been a proliferation of such courses, such as Global English and English Without Borders, a reflection perhaps of English current status as a lingua franca or global language. These courses combine features of what used to be called Commonwealth literature or Anglophone literatures outside England, with attention to Creolized form of the language, South Asian English, West Indian English, and so on. In the coming years, administrative or financial considerations are going to carry as much weight as intellectual principles and norms when it comes to determining the form of curricular substance of the American Comparative Literature Department. Economic retrenchment associated with the current recession had led to the consolidation of some departments into school, and interdisciplinary centers such as humanities institutes are being given the kind of tenure line hitherto confined to the more traditional academic department. And that's it our study for today's topic, and see you again in another video. And bye-bye. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.